something profoundly dangerous about tomorrow. We've made tomorrow our hiding place, our escape route, our permanent residence for dreams that should be living today. And I want to submit to you that the greatest tragedy of human existence is not that we fail, is that we postpone. We postpone transformation. We postpone decisions. We postpone the confrontation with truth that could liberate us in a single moment. Right now, as I'm speaking to you, there are versions of yourself, better versions, stronger versions, wealthier versions, more peaceful versions that are waiting for permission to emerge. They are not waiting for more time. They are not waiting for better circumstances. They are waiting for a decision, one day, this day. I want to take you into something that shifted everything for me, and I believe it will do the same for you. There was a season in my life when I found myself trapped in a cycle that seemed unbreakable. Every morning, I would wake up with intentions, good intentions, strong intentions, but by nightfall, I was the same person, same habits, same thought patterns, same frustrations. And the most painful part wasn't the repetition, it was the awareness. I knew what I needed to do. I knew the life I was supposed to live, but there was a chasm between knowing and becoming. One particular morning, I woke up and something was different. Not in my circumstances, those were still the same. Not in my bank account that was still challenging me, but something in my spirit had reached a breaking point. You know that place where you're so tired of being tired? Where the pain of staying the same finally exceeds the fear of change? I had arrived there. I sat at the edge of my bed, and instead of reaching for my phone like I always did, instead of diving immediately into the noise and demands of the day, I did something radical. I stopped. I became still. And in that stillness, I asked myself a question that changed everything. If I could fix anything about my life today, not someday, not when conditions are perfect, but today, what would it be? The answer came immediately. My mind, my thinking patterns. The conversations I was having with myself when no one else was listening. Because here's what I had discovered. Your life cannot be better than the quality of your thoughts. Your external world is simply a photograph of your internal landscape. Show me a man whose life is in chaos, and I'll show you a mind that hasn't been organized. Show me a woman who's perpetually broke, and I'll show you a consciousness that hasn't been renewed in the area of provision. But here's where it gets powerful. I realized that morning that I had been trying to change my life by changing my circumstances, when what I needed to do was change my consciousness. I had been fighting effects instead of addressing causes. I had been pruning leaves when I needed to uproot trees. So I made a decision, not a wish, not a hope, but a 10. Decision that this would be the day, not the day I started a journey toward change, the day I changed, period. And I want to help you understand the mechanics of how that's possible, because it's not mystical or theoretical. It's practical, it's scientific, it's spiritual, and it's available to you right now. Listen carefully. Your life is the sum total of your agreements. Every single thing you're experiencing right now, your financial state, your emotional state, your relational state exists because at some point, consciously or unconsciously, you agree to it. You agree that this is what you deserve. You agree that this is what's possible for you. You agree to the limitations. And the most liberating revelation you can ever receive is this. What you agree to, you can disagree with today. Let me tell you about a man I met several years ago. I'll call him David. That wasn't his real name, but his story is absolutely real. David had built a successful business in his 30s. I'm talking about genuine success. Multiple streams of income, employees, influence in his industry. But there was a problem that was eating him alive from the inside. He was addicted to validation. Every decision he made was filtered through one question. What will people think? He wore clothes he didn't like because they impressed people. He drove a car that was draining his finances because it made a statement. He was in a relationship that was toxic because the person looked good beside him at events. His entire existence had become a performance. And he was exhausted, more than exhausted. He was becoming someone he didn't recognize. One evening, After a particularly draining social event where he had spent hours pretending to be someone he wasn't, he sat in his car in the parking lot and something broke open inside him. He told me later that it felt like a dam bursting. All the pretense, all the performance, all the energy he had spent maintaining an image, it all came crashing down. And in that moment, he made a decision. He didn't decide to gradually work on his people-pleasing tendencies. He didn't decide to slowly transition into authenticity. He decided right there in that parking lot that the performance was over that night, that moment. And then he did something that shocked everyone who knew him. The very next morning, he showed up to a business meeting, a high-stakes meeting with potential investors, dressed casually, not sloppy, but real. He spoke about his business without the usual exaggerations and embellishments. He was honest about the challenges they were facing. And you know what happened? Half the investors walked away. They were there for the show, and when the show ended, they left. But something else happened. The investors who stayed, they weren't just interested anymore. They were committed. They weren't investing in an image. They were investing in a person. And within 6 months, David's business had transformed. Not because the business model changed, but because the man running it had changed. He had fixed his entire life in one day by making one decision to stop performing and start being. Now, you might be thinking, that's a nice story, but my situation is different. My problems are more complex. And I want to challenge that thinking, because that's exactly the kind of thinking that keeps you trapped. Complexity is often just an excuse for inaction. We make things complicated so we have a reason not to change today. Here's what I've learned. Every massive transformation begins with a simple decision, not a complicated strategy, not a 10-step program, a decision. And the decision is always the same: to tell yourself the truth about where you are and to refuse to stay there one more day. You see, we live in a culture that has taught us to negotiate with mediocrity. We've been taught to manage our problems instead of eliminating them. We've been taught to cope with dysfunction instead of confronting it. We've been taught that change is a gradual process that requires patience and time. And while there's truth in the value of patience, there's also a dangerous deception that's hidden in that teaching. The deception is this: that you're not capable of radical transformation, that you need years of therapy, countless books, multiple seminars and perfect conditions before you can become who you're meant to be. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie from the pit of hell. You are one decision away from a completely different life. Think about it. When a person decides to quit smoking, when does the transformation begin? Is it in the future when they've gone through a program? No. It begins the moment they make the decision and take the first action aligned with that decision. The same principle applies to every area of your life. The moment you decide, truly decide, that you're done with poverty, done with toxic relationships, done with emotional instability, done with being less than who you were created to be, that's the moment transformation begins. But here's what you need to understand about decisions. A decision is not a desire. A decision is not a hope. A decision is not a wish. A decision is a cutting off of all other alternatives. The word decide comes from the Latin word decidere, which means to cut off. When you truly decide something, you're cutting off every other possibility. You're burning the bridges. You're eliminating the exit routes. I remember sitting with a young entrepreneur who was frustrated because his business wasn't growing. He had been working on it for 3 years and he was still barely providing enough income to survive. So I asked him a simple question: have you decided to be successful, or have you just wished for success? He looked at me confused, so I broke it down for him. If you've decided to be successful, that means failure is not an option in your mind. That means you will do whatever it takes legally, morally, ethically to succeed. That means when one approach doesn't work, you don't question whether you should continue. You question which approach to try next. That means you've cut off the possibility of remaining where you are. He sat quietly for a moment and then he said something that was so honest, it was painful. I haven't decided. I've been hoping. I've been trying, but I've been keeping backup plans. I've been keeping one foot out the door in case it doesn't work. And that's where most people live. In the land of trying, in the land of hoping, in the land of we'll see what happens. And I want to submit to you that nothing significant will ever happen in your life until you graduate from trying to deciding. So let me bring this to you practically. How do you fix your entire life in one day? You start by identifying the one thing, the core thing that's keeping everything else broken. Not 10 things, not 5 things, one thing. Because here's what I've discovered. Most of our problems are not multiple problems. They are one problem with multiple symptoms. A man comes to me and says, I have financial problems, relationship problems, health problems, and emotional problems. 4 problems, right, wrong. He has one problem, a lack of discipline. And that one problem is manifesting in 4 areas. So if he tries to fix all 4 areas separately, he will exhaust himself and accomplish nothing. But if he fixes the root, if he addresses the discipline issue, all 4 areas begin to transform simultaneously. A woman comes to me and says, I struggle with anxiety, I can't maintain relationships, I keep making poor decisions and I feel purposeless. 4 problems, no. One problem, a broken identity. She doesn't know who she is, so she's anxious about everything. She attracts the wrong people. She makes decisions from a place of insecurity, and she has no sense of direction. Fix the identity issue and watch everything else begin to align. This is the power of root level transformation. This is what it means to fix your entire life in one day. You're not fixing every individual problem. You're addressing the core issue that's feeding all the problems. And when you do that, when you have the courage to go to the root, transformation happens at a speed that will shock you. Now, I need to tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. The reason you haven't fixed your life yet is not because you don't know what to do. It's not because you lack information. We live in an age where information is everywhere. You can find the answer to almost anything with a simple search. The reason you haven't fixed your life yet is because you've been unwilling to pay the price that transformation demands. And what is that price? The price is the death of who you've been. The price is letting go of familiar pain. The price is disappointing some people. The price is looking foolish for a season. The price is admitting you were wrong about some things. The price is taking full responsibility for where you are without blaming anyone or anything else. You see, we want transformation, but we want it to be comfortable. We want to become new without anything dying. We want to gain without losing. We want to ascend without descending. But that's not how transformation works. Something has to die for something new to be born. Some habits have to be buried for new habits to emerge. Some relationships have to end for better ones to begin. Some versions of yourself have to be left behind for the better version to step forward. There's a story I heard years ago about a farmer who had a mule that fell into a deep well. The well was too deep to pull the mule out. And the farmer, after hours of trying, decided that the mule was going to die anyway, so he might as well bury it and fill the well. He started shoveling dirt into the well. Every shovel of dirt that fell on the mule could have buried it. The mule could have stood there and let the dirt pile up until it was covered and died. But instead, something interesting happened. Every time a shovel of dirt landed on the mule's back, the mule would shake it off and step on top of it. Shake it off, step up. Shake it off, step up. Shovel after shovel, the mule kept shaking off the dirt and stepping on it. Eventually, to everyone's amazement, the mule stepped out of the well. What was meant to bury it became the very thing that elevated it. I'm telling you this story because right now, some of you are in a well. Life has been throwing dirt on you. Disappointments, betrayals, failures, setbacks. And you've been standing there letting the dirt pile up on you, thinking it's going to bury you. But what if I told you that same dirt can become your platform? What if the very things that were meant to destroy you could be converted into stepping stones? But here's the key. You have to shake it off and step up. You have to refuse to let what happens to you define what happens in you. You have to make a decision that no matter what gets thrown at you, you're going to use it as a platform for elevation. This is the mindset shift that changes everything. This is what happens in one day. Not the change of circumstances necessarily, but the change of consciousness, the change of how you see yourself, the change of how you interpret what's happening to you. The change of what you're willing to accept and what you're willing to fight against. When I made that decision on the edge of my bed that morning, my circumstances didn't change immediately. But I changed immediately. And because I changed, I started making different decisions. I started having different conversations. I started pursuing different opportunities. I started eliminating different distractions. And within a matter of weeks, not years, weeks, people around me started noticing something was different. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they knew something had shifted. Let me take you deeper into what actually happens when you make that irreversible decision. There's a principle I want you to grasp. When your decision is absolute, the universe begins to reorganize itself around your commitment. Resources you didn't know existed start appearing. People you needed to meet start crossing your path. Opportunities that were always there but invisible to you suddenly become obvious. Why? Because you're no longer searching with the eyes of someone who's trying. You're operating with the vision of someone who has already decided. I want to tell you about a woman I encountered during one of my travels. She was a school teacher in a small community, probably in her mid-40s, and she approached me after a session with tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of frustration mixed with determination. She said, I've been living half a life. I've been playing it safe for 23 years. I chose teaching because it was secure. But my real passion has always been architecture. I see buildings in my dreams. I sketch designs on every piece of paper I touch. But I convinced myself it was too late, that I was too old, that I had too many responsibilities. Then she said something that gave me chills. But today, something broke in me. I'm done negotiating with my own potential. I'm done managing my disappointment. Today, I decided that I'm going to become an architect, and I don't care if it takes me 10 years or if people think I'm crazy. Now, here's what's remarkable. I met that same woman 2 years later, not 10 years, 2 years. She had enrolled in evening classes, leveraged her teaching experience to secure a scholarship, connected with a firm that valued mature students, and was already working on her first major project as an intern. Her entire face had changed. Not just her expression, her actual countenance. She looked 10 years younger. There was a light in her eyes that transformed everything about her presence. But the most powerful thing she told me was this: the decision was the hard part. Once I truly decided, everything else became a matter of execution. The obstacles didn't disappear, but they stopped intimidating me because I was no longer asking if, I was only asking how. That's the shift. That's what happens in one day. You move from if to how. You move from should I to this is how I will. And that movement, that transition from possibility to certainty releases a different kind of energy into your life. Now, I need to address something that's going to challenge some of you. One of the reasons we struggle to fix our lives is because we're addicted to our stories. We've rehearsed our narratives of limitation so many times that they've become our identity. I'm just not good with money. I come from a broken family, so relationships are hard for me. I've always been anxious. I'm not the creative type. Success isn't really for people like me. These stories feel true because we've lived them for so long. But here's what you need to understand. They are not truth. They are agreements. They are interpretations. There are conclusions you drew based on limited evidence, and then you spend years collecting more evidence to support those conclusions. It's called confirmation bias, and is one of the most destructive forces in human psychology. Let me tell you about something I witnessed that completely dismantled my understanding of human limitation. There was a man in a community I visited who was known as the village drunk. For 15 years, this man had been the cautionary tale that parents told their children: study hard or you will end up like him. His family had given up on him. His friends had abandoned him. Even the local religious leaders had stopped praying for him because nothing ever changed. One morning, this man woke up in a gutter, not for the first time, but something was different. His youngest daughter, who was about 7 years old, was standing over him. She had apparently left the house looking for him because he hadn't come home the night before. And this little girl, with tears running down her face, said something that penetrated through all the layers of his addiction and denial. She said, Daddy, I told my friend you were a king, but she says you're just a drunk. Which one is true? In that moment, standing in that gutter with his daughter looking at him, something happened that no intervention, no program, no counseling session had been able to accomplish. He saw himself through her eyes. He saw the gap between who he was created to be and who he had become. And right there, in the middle of that street, he made a decision. He didn't decide to cut back on drinking. He didn't decide to try to get better. He decided that the drunk man died that morning in that gutter, and whoever stood up would be someone different. And you know what happened? He never touched alcohol again. Not because he fought the temptation every day. He told me later that the temptation actually disappeared. The desire left. Why? Because in his consciousness, he was no longer a drunk trying not to drink. He was a father who had been given a second chance, and that father didn't drink. 3 years later, this man had started a small business, rebuilt his relationship with his family, and had become one of the most respected men in that community. People who had known him for decades couldn't believe it was the same person. They kept waiting for him to relapse, but it never happened. Because what happened that day wasn't behavior modification, it was identity transformation. This is what I'm trying to help you see. When you fix your life in one day, you're not fixing behaviors. You're not fixing habits. You're fixing identity. You're answering the question, who am I really? And once that question is answered at the deepest level of your being, everything else begins to align with that answer. But here's where most people miss it. They try to change their behavior while keeping their identity the same. They try to act like a wealthy person while still identifying as poor. They try to behave like a healthy person while still seeing themselves as sick. They try to operate like a successful person while still carrying an identity of failure, and it doesn't work because there's a conflict between who you're trying to be and who you believe you are. Your subconscious mind will always win that battle, always. If you believe you're a person who struggles with money, you can learn all the financial strategies in the world, but you find a way to stay broke. If you believe you're not worthy of love, you can have the most amazing person interested in you, but you sabotage it. Your life cannot exceed your identity. So the work of fixing your life in one day is the work of fixing your identity. And how do you do that? You do it by making a declaration, not a hope, not a wish, a declaration. You declare who you are regardless of what your current circumstances are showing you. This is not positive thinking. This is not pretending. This is not denial. This is you taking authority over your own consciousness and refusing to let your past or your present circumstances define your identity. This is you understanding that you are not what happened to you. You are what you decide to become in response to what happened to you. I declared myself free from poverty long before I had money. I declared myself a teacher long before I had a platform. I declared myself effective long before I saw results. And the declaration wasn't based on evidence. It was based on decision. And once I declared it, my entire being began to organize itself around that declaration. Listen to me carefully. Right now, at this very moment, you have the authority to rewrite your story. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when conditions are perfect. Now. You can close the chapter on who you've been and open a new chapter on who you're becoming. And the gap between those two realities is just a decision. But I have to warn you about something. When you make this decision, when you truly fix your life in one day by transforming your identity and your consciousness, some people are not going to like it. Some people are comfortable with the old you. Some people benefit from your brokenness. Some people feel better about themselves when you're struggling. And when you change, it's going to make them uncomfortable. Your transformation is going to be a mirror that shows them their own lack of transformation, and they are not going to like what they see. So they are going to do everything they can to pull you back. They are going to remind you of your past. They are going to question your motives. They are going to mock your progress. They are going to predict your failure. And this is where you have to be strong. You cannot allow the opinions of people who aren't going where you're going to derail your journey. You cannot let the doubts of people who haven't made the decision you've made cause you to question your decision. You have to be so anchored in your new identity that external noise becomes irrelevant. I learned this the hard way. When I made the decision to transform my life, some of my closest friends became my biggest critics. Not because they were bad people, but because my change challenged their comfort. As long as we were all struggling together, there was camaraderie. But when I decided to stop struggling, I broke the unspoken agreement we had, and they saw it as betrayal. I had to make a painful choice. Stay connected to those relationships and remain stagnant, or honor my decision and trust that new relationships would emerge that align with my new identity. I chose the latter, and it was lonely for a season, but then something beautiful happened. New people started appearing, people who were going where I was going, people who celebrated my growth instead of questioning it, people who challenged me to go higher instead of pulling me back down. Your environment has to match your decision. You cannot make a decision to transform and then continue to immerse yourself in environments that reinforce the old identity. You have to be intentional about what you expose yourself to, who you spend time with, what you watch, what you read, what you listen to. Everything either reinforces your new identity or undermines it. There's no neutral territory. Now, let me give you something practical. Today, this very day, I want you to do 3 things that will begin the process of fixing your entire life. First, identify the lie you've been believing about yourself. What's the story you've been telling yourself that's keeping you trapped? What's the agreement you made with limitation? Write it down. Look at it. And then, out loud, renounce it. Say, this is not truth. This is not my identity. I refuse to carry this story one more day. Second, make a declaration of your new identity. Who have you decided to be? Not who you hope to become. Who you are as of today. Declare it. Write it down. Say it out loud. Let your ears hear your mouth speaking your new reality. I am disciplined. I am prosperous. I am whole. I am purposeful. I am powerful. Whatever your new identity is, declare it with conviction. Third, take one immediate action that aligns with your new identity. Not tomorrow, today, right now. If you've declared yourself disciplined, do something that requires discipline today. If you've declared yourself prosperous, make a financial decision today that a prosperous person would make. If you've declared yourself healthy, take one action today that honors your body. The action doesn't have to be massive. It just has to be immediate and intentional. Because here's what happens. Every action you take either confirms your old identity or establishes your new one. And when you start taking actions that align with your new identity, even small actions, you create momentum. And momentum is everything. Momentum turns decision into destiny. You see, the reason most people never transform is not because they can't, it's because they won't. They won't pay the price. They won't make the uncomfortable decisions. They won't disappoint the people who expect them to stay the same. They won't walk away from familiar pain. They won't risk looking foolish. They won't take responsibility. They won't do today what they could postpone until tomorrow. But you are different. I know you are different because you are still here, still listening, still engaged. Something in you is hungry for transformation. Something in you is tired of the status quo. Something in you knows that you were created for more than what you've been experiencing. And that hunger, that discontent, that holy dissatisfaction, that's the beginning of your breakthrough. Today can be the day. Not the day you start thinking about change. Not the day you start planning for change. The day you change. The day the old you dies and the new you emerges. The day you stop negotiating with mediocrity and start walking in the fullness of who you were created to be. Your entire life can be fixed today, because the problem was never your circumstances, it was your consciousness. And consciousness can change in an instant. The moment you decide, the moment you declare, the moment you act, that's the moment everything shifts. So I'm asking you, what are you waiting for? What permission are you seeking? What perfect condition are you hoping will arrive? Stop waiting. Stop hoping. Stop wishing. Decide today, now. Fix your life by fixing your identity, and watch everything else begin to fall into place. The power is in your hands. The authority is in your mouth. The opportunity is in this moment. One day, one decision, one transformed identity. That's all it takes. And that day is today.